r/Nosleep. Posted by u/koeghls. The last night we ever played games in the dark. Pretty much every kid I know has tried to summon Bloody Mary at one point or another. It's like a rite of passage when growing up. I think once you get old, you try to convince yourself these kinds of things aren't real. To grown-ups, the only really scary thing is taxes apparently. Or mortgages or dentist appointments. Okay, dentist appointments are pretty scary for everyone no matter how old you are. But I had something really scary happen to me, and it all started when I tried to summon Bloody Mary. I go to school at what once was a church building, and a weird one at that. It's got all these winding halls that shoot off in every direction, with a courtyard right in the center of everything. It's pretty easy to get lost in the building, especially when it's dark. Now, most people don't spend time in the dark at school, but my friend Marcy, her dad is a janitor at the school. Sometimes when Marcy and I hang out, we go with her dad while he cleans the whole place up, which can take hours. We've spent countless nights running the halls, playing hide and seek and trying to scare each other. The scariest place is definitely the room that used to be the chapel. It's got all these old, worn-down pews, a creep-looking altar and this horrifying red stained glass that takes the light and spreads it around the room like a bloodbath. We pretty much avoid the chapel as much as possible. I think the school admin do too, because they haven't touched the room since they bought the building. They've left all the hymnals and candles right where they were when the church closed down. Marcy and I have tried all the old tricks when it comes to summoning. At sleepovers, we host seances and pull out the Ouija board. We light candles, burn sage, the whole 9 yards. We've never really summoned anything, though sometimes we freak each other out by pretending the planchette moved on its own or that the curtains are rustling even when the window's closed. But when the sun comes up, we both know none of it was real. But the night Marcy suggested we call upon Bloody Mary, something seemed different. She said her sister taught her how to do it, and even said her sister had actually seen Bloody Mary. Not only that, she'd seen her right there in the school bathroom. There's something about older sisters. They have a certain wisdom, and pretty much whatever they say, you take them at their word. That's just how it works. They know more about the world. They've kissed people. They've bought their own bras instead of having their moms take them to the store like Marcy and I have to do. So when Marcy said Anna saw Bloody Mary, I took her at her word. Marcy said the trick was you had to have a secret you could tell Bloody Mary, something really dark. You see, Bloody Mary had a dark past of her own, Marcy said, and she wanted to feel better about it by hearing about other people's dark secrets. The things we can't even admit to our own reflections in the mirror. I tried really hard to think about my darkest secret. I'd snuck out of the house a few times. I'd lied to my parents countless times but never about anything really important. I stayed up late most nights reading instead of going to bed, but that didn't seem very dark. But then it hit me. Something I had done that I carry with me to this day. Something really, truly awful that I can't ever say to anyone. It happened when I was 8. I had a babysitter, Stephanie, who I loved to pick on. Sometimes my little sister and I would tie Stephanie up, though our knots were always loose and Stephanie could always get out, but she was a good sport and always played along. Sometimes we'd make her gross concoctions and try to convince her to eat them. But this time, I went too far, and I knew it as soon as it happened. Stephanie and my sister were in the backyard. I'd gone out front to pick up a ball that had flown over the fence when an idea struck me. A really good way to pick on Stephanie. I wanted it to be a joke, but it wasn't in the end. I came running to the backyard, screaming that I'd seen a young girl get kidnapped. I said I saw a white van pull up just down the street where a little girl in pigtails was playing, and they scooped her up and peeled away before she even had a chance to scream. Stephanie wasted no time. She ran inside and called the police, who came right away. They questioned me for what felt like forever. They canvassed the neighborhood, put out an alert, knocked on all the doors. They couldn't figure out who the little girl was, but I was so scared of getting in trouble that I stuck to my story and tried to be as convincing as possible. And they all believed me. A sketch artist drew up a picture of a little girl that didn't exist. I said it looked just like her, and it circulated on the news and on light poles for a long time after that. Still, no one could say who the little girl was. No parents came forward to say their child had gone missing. No teachers reported an absent student. But no one came back and asked me if I was lying, if I was making it all up. I guess I was a pretty good liar. So that's what I would tell Bloody Mary. I would tell her I lied about the whole thing. I scared everyone in my neighborhood. I made it so parents didn't feel safe letting their kids out of their sight. I wasted the officer's time, scared my babysitter and scared my parents. And I never came forward to tell the truth. I didn't know what Marcy was going to tell Bloody Mary, but Marcy seemed to have an idea already. I wondered if her secret was worse than mine. Marcy said we'd need a candle before we could start the ceremony. That's what she called it, a ceremony. Like a wedding or a funeral. She knew just where to get the candle, too. The chapel. She double dog dared me to go in alone. I think she was really just scared of doing it herself, but you can't back down from a double dog dare. I'd been in the chapel a few times, so I knew all the candles were up near the altar, on the opposite side from the doors. The doors creaked when I entered, sending a loud echo through the cavernous chapel and sending shivers down my spine. I felt cold and wished I brought a jacket, but really I wished we hadn't decided to do this at all. I started to tiptoe across the chapel floor. I don't know why, but it just seemed smarter to be as quiet as possible. I passed the first few pews and took a look around in the blood-red light bathing everything in the room. It was stuffy in here, filled with air that hadn't circulated in a very long time. I made it past a few more pews, then a few more. I was almost to the altar when I heard something off to my right. It was so soft I almost didn't hear it, but I knew that I did. It was like someone's feet were shuffling across the carpet. When I turned to look, the sound stopped. Maybe I didn't hear it. Maybe it was my own feet. Maybe it was a mouse. Maybe it was Bloody Mary herself, coming a little early to the party. I wanted to call out and ask if someone was there, but my throat was closed up tight and so were my feet. I was completely frozen. And then I heard it again. Just a very quiet slither across the carpet, and this time there was no mistaking it. Something was in here with me. I squeaked and ran up to the altar, grabbing a handful of candles and knocking over the rest of the pile, sending tapers rolling down the carpet and onto the pews. I almost fell as my foot rolled over one on my way out. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. But then I was on the other side of the door, panting in front of Marcy, who was trying to look amused but really just looked scared. There was. I was gasping for breath. I had my back up against the chapel door as if to prevent anything else from coming out. But nothing tried. There was something in there, I whispered. Marcy's eyes went wide. I wanted to convince her that this time, I wasn't kidding. This time it was real. But I don't think she believed me. Not yet, anyway. We scurried down the hall toward the bathroom and I tried to forget what I'd heard. It really probably was a mouse. Or a rat maybe. Whatever it was, it probably lived in the chapel and I just disturbed it. But a rat wouldn't be able to open those doors, and even if it could, a rat was no big deal. Marcy's dad could handle it. And either way, we'd be safe inside the bathroom. With Bloody Mary. Marcy had a box of matches already. She always had matches. It was an obsession with her, to strike a match and watch the flame snake its way down to her fingers. She'd snuff it out as soon as it flicked her skin. She liked the way it felt. I didn't totally get it, but at least she had matches. We closed the bathroom door. The bathroom had a little waiting area with a love seat, which we used to push up against the bathroom door. Marcy said we needed to check all the stalls first. We had to make sure no one else was in here. If someone was there and not ready to tell Bloody Mary their deepest, darkest secret, she would kill them on the spot. One by one, I checked each stall, half expecting a giant rat to come hurtling out toward me. But each stall was empty and clean. Marcy's dad always did a good job of keeping the place neat. Marcy lit the candle and then turned out the light. The flame reflected off the mirrors, making it look like there were several Marcys all with their own sticks of fire. Marcy said we had to say Bloody Mary's name 3 times while staring at the candle in the mirror. We couldn't look away or else she wouldn't come. I never stopped to ask what should happen when she did come. I just stared at the candle and started to say Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Bloody. Before we could finish, there was a loud thud against the bathroom door. Marcy and I both screamed. She dropped the candle, which flickered against the bathroom floor before sputtering out. After a half-second of darkness, a light came streaming in through the door, wrapping around the figure of a man standing there. It wasn't Marcy's dad. I don't think either of us knew what to do. This wasn't what we expected at all. The person in the doorway wasn't Bloody Mary, but we didn't know who he was. Hello? Marcy said. Her voice was shaking like a leaf. The man started to come into the bathroom, and I think that's when we decided to react. Marcy grabbed a tissue box off the counter and threw it at the man, who was caught off guard for a second. Marcy tried to dart past him, but he was quick. He grabbed her hair and flung her against the wall, right into a floor-length mirror that shattered loudly. Marcy screamed again, and this time like she was in real pain. Glass spilled around her and the man continued in toward us. letting the door swing shut behind him. We were once again in total darkness. My body moved on its own. I went toward Marcy, trying to be careful because of all the broken glass. I felt the man's hand brush against my shoulder, and then Marcy screamed again. I think he might have gotten her by the hair again. I reached out for her and felt her yanked away. The door opened and I saw the man dragging Marcy out through the door. She was kicking and screaming and clawing at the man, but he barely seemed to notice. When the door closed again, I was left in the pitch black for the third time that night. Panic had already set in. What on earth just happened, and how was I going to save Marcy? What could I do? What could I do? I just kept thinking that over and over again as I tried to get my head straight. My hand went down to the ground and scraped against something sharp. I winced and pulled my hand back, but that was just what I needed. My mind was a little clearer, and I had the start of an idea. I jumped up and turned on the bathroom light. The shattered mirror had blood splotches, and I knew Marcy had been hurt. I found a long, jagged piece of glass, wrapped the end in paper towels, and ran out of the bathroom. "Mr. Motseek! Mr. Motseek!" I screamed, hoping Marcy's dad would be nearby. Like I said, it was a big, confusing place, so he could be clear on the other side of the building and not hear a peep. I had to just hope he could hear me. The one good thing about this place being so old was the carpet, the kind you could have mowed. Your feet left obvious impressions wherever you went, making it super easy to track people right after it had been vacuumed. I could clearly see where the man dragged Marcy away. Right toward the chapel. "Mr. Motseek!" I screamed again at the top of my lungs. "Help!" I hesitated in front of the chapel door. That's another secret I don't think I can ever tell anyone. I didn't want to go inside, and I just stood there frozen, almost to the point of turning around and running away. But then I heard Marcy scream and I knew I had no choice. I threw the door open and looked around frantically. Marcy and the man were nowhere to be seen. But the creak of a door on the other side of the room told me what I needed to know. He was taking her to the basement. It was one of only two other doors in the chapel, the other one led to a back hallway where the priest would come from at the start of services, but something told me that's not where they were headed. Somehow, I just knew he was headed for the basement. I ran hard trying to get to them, but this time when my foot rolled over a candle, I did fall. My hand came down hard on the glass shard, cutting my palm open and sending a dark red stain through the paper towels. I almost didn't feel the pain at all. And for a moment, I forgot all about my deep fear of blood. Another good thing about the place was that the basement door did not have a lock. I kicked the door open and saw Marcy's feet being dragged around the corner at the bottom of the stairs. I was halfway down when he cut the lights and we were in the dark once again. I could hear Marcy whimpering, but the basement was all concrete, making it hard to figure out where any sounds were coming from. I knew there was a light switch right in the middle of the room. I just had to find it. I held out my open, uncut hand and kept my glass shard ready. If I felt anything, I'd stab first and ask questions later. I walked right into an end table, which probably would have hurt if I weren't so hopped up on adrenaline. I'd heard some people could get so high on adrenaline in intense situations that they could have their hand chopped clean off and not even feel it. The end table meant I was getting close to the light switch. When the school bought the building, they piled up a bunch of furniture down here, stacking it in the center of the room. I began to make my way through, pushing past a stack of chairs, a row of folded tables. And then I felt the wooden post. I slid my hand up, catching a splinter along the way, until I felt the switch. But before I could get my fingers around it, a hand came around my face, pulling my body backward. That adrenaline is a real trip, though. In a rage, I brought my foot hard down on his foot, causing him to back off just a tiny bit. I spun around and brought my knee up as hard as I could. I heard a loud grunt as a fist came up and punched me in the face. Too late, though, to stop me from bringing the glass shard into his side. It felt like slicing into an apple. I tried to think of it that way as I pulled it back toward me, cutting through the side of his body. My hand was bathed in warm blood, and I felt the man fall in front of me, knocking over the stack of chairs on top of him. I let the glass go down with him. It took me a while, maybe a few minutes, maybe a few seconds, maybe I stood there for an hour, before I moved. I tried to catch my breath but all I could do was hyperventilate. The man groaned for a while but eventually went totally quiet. Then I heard Marcy whine somewhere in the darkness, and I started to move back toward the light switch. In a way, it was all more horrible in the light. I'll never scrub the man's face from my brain, or the sight of his blood everywhere, spilling out of his gaping side. I left bloody footprints all the way up the stairs and onto the carpet in the chapel. Marcy was mostly okay. She'd cut her head, but head cuts always look worse than they really are. She had a few stitches, and so did I on my palm, which did eventually start to hurt. Marcy's dad had been looking for us. He hadn't heard my screams, but he did find broken glass and blood in the bathroom, and he'd called the police, who were already there by the time we emerged from the dark chapel. Everyone was really confused for a few minutes until I calmed down enough to tell them a stunted version of what happened. We spent the next several hours in the hospital, where a steady stream of police officers came to ask us question after question. Had we ever seen the man before? Did we have any idea how he'd gotten into the building? What exactly happened and how did we get away? Neither Marcy or I had ever seen him before, and the police weren't sure where he came from or how he got into the school that night. But we didn't have to worry anymore, the police told us. He was going away for a long time, and we were safe now. But Marcy and I never felt safe again. That was the last time we ever decided to play games in the dark.